We'll get underway. And I just need to turn that notification on.
Jeff?
What?
I think he may have clicked on leave the meeting.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for Jeff to get going, I'll do some intro stuff. So thanks everyone for joining us here tonight. Perfect, Jeff has come back. Very shortly, I'll turn things over to Jeff for some opening remarks, and then he'll turn things over to the applicant. So as you know, we're here today to discuss, I think it's 1186 to 1194 Wellington Street West. Proposed development, it hasn't been filed yet, but it should be on DevOps in the coming weeks. We'll explain a little bit more about how that works throughout the evening. Basically, over time, you want to follow this meeting up with comments to both our office and to Steve Gauthier, who is the lead planner on the file. So Steve, you can wave your hand and you can see his name there. Once a sign goes on the property, that's how you know it's been officially filed. You can send comments anytime after this meeting, but there will be like an official period of time where they're taking comments, and that'll be denoted by when the sign's on the property. For a development of this size, this is our first opportunity to talk about it with you. So this will be a long process, and there'll be lots of opportunities for community discussion. This may not even be the last open house we have on it, depending on how the conversations go. So as well, I have recorded this for YouTube. So if any of your neighbors happen to miss tonight's section, it'll be on our YouTube channel by the end of the week, which I guess is tomorrow. You can email us and ask for the link, or you can just Google Kitchissippi Ward and then the address of this development, and you'll be able to find that and pass it along to whoever. And if any of your questions don't get answered tonight, again, you can email us and we can make sure that your questions get answered. And since we have Jeff back, I will turn it over to Jeff for some opening remarks.
I apologize. I just up and left the meeting. Hit the wrong button. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It is a beautiful evening, so I expect the numbers are a little bit low this evening. There are 35 people listed as participants. So that's the kind of turnout that we're looking at here. This is very early in the process, and I am not certain what approach I'm taking to this one at this point. Full disclosure, I live around the corner, and certainly my neighbors and I are talking a lot about the potential traffic on Hamilton Avenue North. So from a personal perspective, I know I'll be focused on that a fair bit, but with respect to the height and the density and the use and such, I'll be listening carefully to what residents tell me over the next few weeks, as well, obviously, as working with the Hintonburg Community Association. The projects can change in a significant way in these types of processes. We saw what happened at 979 Wellington, where that was substantially changed as a result of the public feedback and mine and the planners. But with that, I think I will just turn it over. So turn it over to you, or is Paul just going to take the lead? We'll turn it over.
I think I'm going to share the slides, if you don't mind.
Okay. So folks, I'll turn you over to Simon Coe, and I look forward to hearing the presentation with you as well. It has been a couple of months since I've seen this one.
Before Simon starts, sorry to interrupt, I forgot to explain how the Q&A is going to work for those who haven't done one of these with us virtually yet before. You'll notice if you're on a desktop, there is a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. That's where I'm going to be reading all the questions for this evening. So any questions or comments that you want read out loud and addressed, please put them in the Q&A. I'm going to read them in the order that they come up in. I'm going to try as much as possible to stay on one topic at a time. So if I see a few questions about traffic, a few questions about concerns about increased density, I'll read those out and then go back into the queue. And once, as much as possible, if we've answered a question once, and if someone else has asked it a few questions later, I might just not read the second question that we've already addressed. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. You can put them in throughout the presentation, and like I said, I'll just read them in order, kind of thematically as they come up. And you can put in the Q&A if any of that is confusing and you need me to clarify anything else. That's how you can talk to me this evening. Sorry, Simon, please.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Fiona. I'm going to be the ones advancing the slide for the team, but I think before that, I think Kevin's going to lead us off with a few introductions.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks. I'll introduce the team, and thanks, as always, to you, Fiona, and Councillor Leeper for setting this up and making the time for us to present this evening. It's very much appreciated. A virtual good evening to everyone. We appreciate you making the time to be here this evening. It's beautiful out, and we appreciate you being here despite these crazy times, and I hope you're all taking care and keeping well. I'm Kevin Harper, and I manage infill development projects for the Minto Group here in Ottawa. And as Fiona mentioned, we're here to discuss our pending applications. We haven't filed them yet for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for 1186 to 1194 Wellington Street in Hintonburg. And this is an important project for us at Minto. It gives us to participate in kind of the ongoing evolution of the Wellington Street corridor, which is absolutely one of the best in the city. People want to live in this neighborhood. It's in the middle of everything. It's unique, it's colorful, it's diverse. People want to shop on Wellington Street. They want to shop at the Wellington, or at the Parkdale Market, I should say, for their daily needs. People want to be able to walk everywhere, or bike, or e-scooter, or transit to where they need to go instead of driving a car. So this project is really all about that, and we're excited to be working in this part of the city. So we have several key team members for the project here this evening to present the project and answer any questions that anyone may have. That's the point of the webinar. So first, from FO10 Planning and Design, we have Paul Black, and Paul is going to present the planning and zoning context for this particular site and how it guided the proposed development concept. And Dialogue Design is our project architect and landscape architect. And Dialogue is an award-winning Canadian design firm that specializes in urban architecture and the public realm. And Simon Coe is with us, and he's going to present the architectural concept and some of the key design considerations. And then Bryce Miranda is here as well, and he's going to present the proposed landscape design. And last but not least, considering where we are at anything that has anything to do with Parkdale, CGH Transportation is our traffic consultant. Andrew Hart is here this evening to answer any technical questions that any of you may have on traffic. And before I pass things over to Paul Black to kick us off, I just wanted to just quickly address the reason why most of you are likely tuning in this evening, and that's building height. And there's several reasons for why we're proposing this specific built form in this specific location. And we hope that you'll listen and you'll feel free to ask more about it as we move through this evening and through the planning process with the community and with the city. And I can promise you that we'll do our best to do the same. So thank you for being here again, and I will pass it over to Paul Black.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Paul Black, Senior Planner at FO10. So to start off, we'll just sort of locate ourselves on the site. So the site is the southwest corner of the Wellington Street West and Parkdale Avenue intersection, the heart of Hintonburg, really. It occupies the full block between Parkdale Avenue on the east side and Hamilton to its west, along the south side of Wellington Street. Currently, it's the site of the Rexall Pharmacy and a surface parking lot, and the former Elmdale Theatre building, now Cornerstone House of Refuge Church. This surrounding context you can see in this graphic here, but to the north, obviously the biggest element probably is Parkdale Park and the Parkdale Market, important community space along the corridor. To the east is the Reichman Retirement Residence that's currently under construction, as well as some other legacy mid and high-rise buildings, and 1140 Wellington, which is another taller building along the corridor. To the south, immediate south, is the St. Albertus Church property, which is a brick church building along Parkdale Avenue and associated surface parking in behind. And then there's a rental apartment building as well along Parkdale Avenue. And then south of the church property along Hamilton are low-rise residential homes. To the west is really the Wellington Street West retail strip with low-rise retail uses along the street, and like Kevin says, a very successful main street within the city. Wellington Street is a transit priority corridor, meaning that the city makes efforts to provide reliable and frequent transit service along this street. It's also within, the site's also within approximately 750 meters walk of the Tunney's Pasture LRT station. The next slide is the official plan. So the official plan designation for the property is traditional Main Street, given the Wellington Street frontage. Traditional Main Streets in the official plan are envisioned as compact, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use streets. Intensification they are target areas for intensification within the city's official plan, and new buildings are encouraged to enclose the street edge and create a pedestrian-friendly scale and pedestrian-friendly environment along this street. Policies of the official plan support heights up to 9 stories generally, unless a secondary plan specifies otherwise, as it does in this case, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Requests for greater heights than 9 stories are considered under specific criteria as outlined in the official plan. Those include things like proximity to transit, the provision of a community benefit, conformity with the urban design compatibility and compatibility policies of the official plan, as well as a comprehensive review of impacts. And so our work to date, as we've been working to prepare this application over the past few months, has involved looking at those criteria as we suggest, or as we propose a building of greater height at this location. Next slide. Looking at the CDP and secondary plan, the property is within what is known as the traditional Main Street designation within the Parkdale Park area, shown here on the map. The plans speak, both plans, the CDP and the secondary plans, speak a fair bit about the intersection of Parkdale and Wellington, recognizing its importance and prominence within the corridor. Specifically, development at this corner is encouraged to include a variety of active uses at grade. So retail, restaurant type uses also encourages widening the sidewalk in the public realm to provide more space both at the corner of Parkdale and Wellington, but also along the street where the sidewalk width is fairly limited. The secondary plan and CDP support building heights generally up to 6 stories along the corridor, but at the intersection of Parkdale and Wellington, it recognizes a height of 9 stories at the corner, given the prominence, like I mentioned. And so as Kevin noted, we are planning to propose an official plan amendment to permit the proposal that's we're here to talk about tonight. And that official plan amendment would be to the secondary plan to permit the taller. In terms of the zoning bylaw, this site is zoned traditional Main Street with subzone 11. You can jump to the next slide, Simon, thanks. The traditional Main Street zone permits a range of mix of uses, retail, residential, as proposed here. Exception 1815, which applies to the corner property, which is essentially the Rexall parking lot, also sets the minimum building height of 4 stories, again, given the corner location. So we would be looking to, or we will be submitting a zoning bylaw amendment together with the official plan amendment to permit the proposed development. The expectation is to rezone the three parcels that make up the subject property with a site-specific exception and schedule. So I think likely the most prominent question, as Kevin noted, is why a high-rise at this location? So next slide, Simon. And so there's been a lot of thought, or we've put a lot of thought into why a high-rise we think fits at this corner. We are proposing an 18-story building right on the corner of Wellington and Parkdale with a 6-story podium extending across Wellington Street frontage and stepping down to 1 story along Hamilton Avenue. So, and Simon will present some more details of that. But a few of the reasons we felt that this site was appropriate for high rise are noted here. So the first being lot size. So along this corridor, the full block width is fairly rare, and it affords us with the opportunity to transition within the site from a higher building down to the adjacent low rise and down to the other parts of the corridor. And given the corner, we felt like that's doable on the site and appropriate for the site. Site also has 3 public street frontages, which provides lots of opportunity for activity and pedestrian interaction at the street level. And so we've tried to do that through retail uses at grade and a pop space extending around the side of the building. We also recognize the prominence of the intersection, as does the CDP in the secondary plan. It's an important intersection in Hindenburg and deserves to be marked. In our opinion, not only by building height, but also by excellent public space at grade and good design at the corner. So as I noted, Wellington is a transit priority corridor. It's also, like I said, about 750 meters walk to the Tunney's Pasture transit station, or around 10 minutes. So that's something that supports a density through the city's official plan policies generally. And the CDP also speaks to public realm improvements at the corner and along Wellington. And so we've made efforts to do that, taking a sort of a 360 approach to the building design that Bryce will outline in a little bit. The 4 frontages, really, the back frontage being the public lane that extends across the south face of the building, and seeing what we can do to really make that space valuable and useful for the public, and providing more space for the pedestrians. And then finally, it's compatibility and transition. Obviously, that's the biggest question always when we're talking about high-rise buildings, is how does it fit within the neighborhood, within the character of the corridor in this case. So from a neighborhood perspective, we've looked at the city's design guidelines for high-rise buildings that speak to transition and evaluating transition, floor plate size and separation from other high-rise buildings. And as you'll see, you can see the way that the building has been oriented is intended to reduce impacts from shadows, but also to provide a suitable transition to the low rise that is in the area. Also within the corridor, obviously, we recognize that this is not something that should be repeated. We think that the corner of Parkdale and Wellington is a prominent corridor within the along the corridor. It's recognized in the CDP and secondary plan as such, and it should be marked, I guess. But it's our intention is that this site as a high rise fits for because it's able to be done in a sensitive and mitigating impacts as we've proposed it, we think. So those are the reasons that we've come to for a high-rise building, and we intend to put those as part of our secondary plan amendment forward as sort of criteria for why this site, in our opinion, fits for high-rise. And then finally, just looking at the urban design guidelines on the next slide, Simon, for traditional main streets and urban design guidelines for high-rise buildings, we've looked at both of these in terms of the design of the building. These provide direction for both, well, what they describe, both for development along traditional main streets, but also for high-rise buildings. And so we've taken the direction that we can from that and have applied it to the building. So things like I mentioned, the angular planes and separation from high-rises, the height of the podium, that sort of thing. So with that, I'll pass it over to Simon, who will walk you through the actual design of the building.
Thank you, Paul. In this context view, I'd like to recap a little bit about the context. Our site is shown in middle in purple. The existing buildings are shown in gray, including a 14-story apartment just south of us on Parkdale. The approved buildings are shown in orange, including a 9-story building just to the east on the other side of Parkdale, and approved 18-story development on Parkdale, 1 block north of Wellington. The surrounding amenities are shown in the light blue, and our site is about 600 meters to the Tunney Pasture LRT station, as Paul mentioned. And for the green spaces, the Parkdale Park not far to the north, and the McCormick Park to the northeast. This is one of the site section in elevation, sort of. The top one is along the Wellington looking south. Our proposed development clears the angular plane from Hamilton side, which starts at about 20 meters up The bottom one is cut along the existing laneway looking north. Our proposed development also clears the 45-degree angle plane from the Hamilton side, which starts from 11 meters up. Here's the top elevations cut along the Hamilton side looking east on this with the 6-story podium of the building in the foreground, relating and transitioning to the existing low-rise residential buildings to the right along Hamilton. The bottom one is cut along Parkdale looking west with the 14-story existing building on the left side and the existing church in between. Our proposed development maintains a 30-meter separation distance to the existing 14-story building. For building massing, we have the 1-story, mostly retail. Initially, we add an 8-story residential podium on top to make a 9-story building. But because of being rather massive, and after discussion with staff and councilor, we decided to reduce by 3 stories to make a 6-story podium. We also recessed the corner at Parkdale as a POPs and added a 3-meter setback along Parkdale to widen the public realm. And we proposed to remake the Amdale Theater marquee canopy at the Hamilton corner as a special feature. With the reduction of the 3 stories, we added the floor areas in a vertical mass to the Parkdale side and keep the main podium along Wellington at 6 stories, creating a lower scale along Wellington and to have a better transition to the low rise on Hamilton. We also believe the taller height on Parkdale can create more hierarchy on Parkdale, noting there are, of course, more transit, more pedestrian movements on this busy corridor. This illustrates the podium and the various uses of our proposed building. In the site plan, the lightest gray color is the 1-story podium. Then we step back right away and goes up to 6 stories. And the taller portion on the right is shifted to the east along Parkdale. At the ground level, the retail fully lines the Wellington frontage. The north retail face is set back another 0.8 meters to create a wider public realm on Wellington. The northeast corner is recessed as a larger pop space together with a 3-meter setback on Parkdale. And in the northwest corner, there's a recreated Amdale Theater marquee entrance canopy. These 2 corners of Wellington frontage will nicely bookend this block and will help to activate this neighborhood along the stretch. The ramp, bike parking, garbage storage, and loading are placed towards the center in the back, while the retail and the residential lobby anchors the 2 outside ends. We want to widen the existing laneway to a full 6-meter width and dress it up as a wood earth to make it a safe and pleasant environment. Going up, this is the typical floor plan podium with residential units lining Wellington with a minimum of 2.8 meters setback. The typical tower plate starts on the 8th floor and goes up to the 18th floor. Again, a total of 5.3 meter setback on Wellington and 4 meters on Parkdale side. The floor plate is 750 square meters with 12 units per floor. Here's a cross-section looking south. There's a 6-story podium and the 18-story tower portion on the Parkdale side. The outdoor amenity roof on the 7th floor. Currently, we have planned for 3-level underground parking with no service parking whatsoever. Here's our section looking east, 0.8 meter setback for the retail along Wellington to widen the public realm. Podium units of the podium setback 2.8 meters and the tower setback another additional 2.5 meters. This cross-section cuts at the west podium and at the 7th floor outdoor amenity roof and stepping down to 1 story eventually with the green roof. Here are a few massing views of the proposal. Notice we put the height and density on Parkdale side and we lower the podium to 6 stories along Wellington, which works well with preserving the spirit of the recreated Amdale Theater marquee at the Hamilton corner and to scale down the heights towards the Hamilton side and to the south side of Hamilton. Here's the north elevation, which is along Wellington with a continuous glazed retail canopy with masonry piers Accompanied by its continuous glazed canopy. There's the POPs at Parkdale on the left, very close to the existing bus stop. The 6-story podium is clad with masonry with various sizes openings to allow for openings, windows, balconies, but in a more horizontal emphasis, keeping a comfortable scale and proportion for this main street. And the setback taller portion is treated much more simple and clean while focusing on the articulation of the 6-story podium. This is the east elevation on Parkdale. Our building is separated to the South Church property by a laneway, which is saw in the middle, and a massing of this existing 14-story building on the left. On the elevation, we want to do the opposite of the north elevation, reversing the masonry treatment to the taller portion of the vertical emphasis and downplaying the amount of balconies. While on the podium, we want to keep the podium clean, very simple, with a few French balconies. Similarly, on the west elevation shows the end portion of the 6-story podium as a simple facade with French balconies again, anchored by the retail at the ground level with the same masonry pier treatment. And the taller portion is fully recessed, intentionally, of course, and away from Hamilton. The shift of the massing from the 6 stories to the 18-story is very apparent in this view, with the existing church property in the foreground, hiding the base of the building. This view is an eye-level view on Wellington, showing the recessed POPs with the 3-meter setback along Parkdale, the masonry detail facade of the 6-story podium, the ground level masonry piers with continuous glazed canopy, enhancing the public realm, pedestrian environment, especially right at the corner where the POPs is. This is on Wellington at the corner of Hamilton, showing the recreated Amdale Theater marquee canopy and the retail entrance addressing this special corner. This is the same view on Wellington, but maybe showing the recreated canopy being lit up at night with the corner as an entrance anchoring the public realm from this end of the block. And this view is closer up on Parkdale at the south laneway. There's the POPs with the 3-meter setback, and the entrance to the residential lobby is right here, having exposure to the south, keeping the Woolner laneway busy and safe. And this view is closer up on Hamilton, on the south side, on the south laneway looking from the west. There's an imagined laneway with special paving and activated, much improved than the current state of a back lane. And at this end, the retail can wrap this corner with some much needed activities. Here's some shadow study we did, showing the March and September shadow. Most of the shadows fall into the commercial lands to the north of the site, and our shadows have very little or no impact on the Parkdale Park to the north. More in the March and September. Here are the June shadows, much shorter. And these are the December shadows. And here's Bryce, my partner on the landscape design.
All right, I'm going to take you from December and we're going to go into the summer months, my preferred months, and take a look at the landscape. The landscape and site design responds to both the architecture and the context of the site. It was mentioned before by Paul, but we truly are taking a 360-degree approach using distinct paving that will wrap around the building, improving the public realm and building interfaces on all sides. The northeast and northwest corners have unique unit paving that will act as a welcome mat into the building and complement the cinematic gestures that Simon was talking about and carried in the architecture. We're looking to improve the pedestrian experience around the site by planting street trees wherever we can, wherever it's possible, by using soil cells to improve soil volume and negotiate utilities on Parkdale Avenue, and by planting in softscape on Hamilton and the adjacent church lot, the trees will have the right environment to grow substantially and bring character, comfort, and improved canopy to shade the area. Next slide. A key part of the landscape design is the additional privately owned and publicly accessible space. Our design intent is to seamlessly integrate the design POP space into the improved public realm network. The northeast corner is where you'll see most of that, and it supports this notion of the POPs through the use of bespoke benches. Flexible in the layout, they'll enable access to the building, but also be a space for transit users to casually wait for the Parliament bus. This will happen while they'll be protected from the elements by the extended canopy above that was shown earlier. Adding both feature lighting within the benches and projection from the canopy above, the space will be vibrantly animated in the evening, making it a safe place to be at night. The focal point of the corner carries south along Parkdale with an improved paving treatment above the soil cell system. This leads us to the laneway, which extends to the southern entrance. The unit paving we're proposing, if you're aware of the unit paving that's over at Lansdowne, we're suggesting the same type of paver. And in that there will be a reduction of curbs and an introduction of bollards to support that approach. In many ways, it's designed as a Woonerf. It'll be more than back of house. Cyclists can lock their bicycles next to the gym amenity and maintain their bikes with a repair station. A dog relief area is also being proposed in the southwest corner for quick relief for dogs, but really you're going to take your dog over to the nearby Parkdale Park, but that's as soon as you get out of the building. Next slide. The amenity terrace on level 7 is similarly community focused in its design approach. Community garden is proposed where it'll engage residents through the act of gardening. The harvest can later be enjoyed with the adjacent barbecue and covered seating areas. There's a stair access that comes up, and maybe I'll just highlight it there. And with that we can pull off some walls off of that stair access and create rooms extending from the structure. Next slide. Mounds of planting are added to support some larger trees as well on the terrace, softening the rooftop and making it in many ways an urban oasis within the city. The Wellington Street edge, which is up here, would also be lit with catenary lights. The hanging lights will not only animate the terrace, but it's also going to contribute to the streetscape below. You can imagine being on Wellington and catching a glimpse of the lights on the rooftop. And in this perspective, you can get a better sense of what Simon and Paul were talking about in the Woonerf, and what we're trying to achieve. It's a pedestrian-friendly environment and accommodating space that's visually appealing. This goes above and beyond your standard utilitarian laneway that's designed for vehicles. It's really meant for people as well. We'll be carrying the unit paving through the laneway, which really, again, supports the 360-degree approach to the site mentioned earlier. And we'd also be looking at putting in some catenary lights that you can just faintly see here to give it more of a human scale, but also animate it in the evening time. And if you go to the next slide, I'll pass it over to Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. And here are some energy savings sustainability features of this development from Minto, including targeting LEED certification. Here's another view from the north with the proposed development and the proposed 18-story building in the foreground. In closing, I think this design concept proposed to unlock and to adapt to the unique features of this site and to accommodate with little or no impact to the surrounding context. So that is a presentation we have for you tonight. And our client and design team are here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have 9 questions in the queue right now. So feel free to keep inputting questions and we'll get right to it. So traffic on Parkdale is already unmanageable. How will this be addressed with the addition of this many new units?
So currently, I will everyone that we we haven't submitted the application, so not all the studies are done, but we're in progress. Currently, the site is going to rely significantly on transit and access for a lot of the peak hour traffic, which is typically the condition is well aware of on Parkdale. While the site, the full block site provides a lot of opportunities from the planning side and definitely the architectural and landscaping design sides. It is a challenge from the traffic and access perspective. What we've tried to do, and we're moving ahead with, is keeping that access in that back laneway, and it's actually probably going to restrict access out onto Parkdale, with the understanding that the queues and options coming from Parkdale up to Wellington would not permit all the movements we'd like to make. So it's currently most of the access is coming off of Wellington on the Hamilton block length right now.
Thank you. And on that note, there's a similar question. Hamilton, as a residential street, is already very busy due to backups on Parkdale. This development will add to the traffic problems. What are you proposing to regulate and calm traffic on the residential road of Hamilton?
So as I mentioned, and we haven't submitted or even and received city comments back on it from the pre-consultation with staff. We did ask about what ideas the city may have as we progress through the study, and that we could incorporate onto Hamilton to help ease this burden or improve the situation. They're looking into it, but it's really going to, the ideas are really going to flow, and the collaboration between our team and the city is going to happen after the submission. So I would, unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you right now. I would say keep posted, and we'll come back with something. But maybe from a high level perspective, what we're looking at for new trips in the area are around, 20 in and 40 to 50 out trips in the AM and reversed in the PM for cars. So it's not a significant volume, but it is something that we're going to analyze a little bit further in the traffic study, and should come out after the circulation and city staff responses.
If I may, again, putting on my resident hat, this is something that I'll be particularly close attention to, and I'll be looking forward to working with resident staff, with the city on the measures that we need on Hamilton North to try to keep the traffic on Parkdale and Wellington. But it's going to take several weeks, months to come up with final solutions before we get to a zoning vote.
And yeah, we also then will be a year away from site plan as well, when we will get to see these details. So not to push it off, but we are moving towards that. Hopefully a little patience will be appreciated for us, but hopefully we can come up to something that's good for everybody.
Well, I know how these goes, and for those of you on Hamilton Avenue, please stop me in the street and chat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is the building to be condos or apartments? And how many 2-bedroom units? Can include those.
Well, I have one answer. The other one I can't remember off the top of my head. I might need help from Simon. But at this time, this is looking as if it'll be a rental project, not a condominium project. And I think this concept includes some 240, I think, Simon. And I think what we typically try to shoot for is at least 40% of those being 2 bedrooms and 2-bed plus or 3 bedrooms. So that's usually the split in Ottawa that seems to work. So 60% 1 and 1 plus den, and about 40% 2 and 2 plus den. So out of 240, what's the math on that? So So I would say almost 100 of the units would be 2 and 2 plus.
Thank you. And on a similar, this is on a similar note, so I'm just going to read it out loud, but you've answered most of it. What range of housing options are you envisioning? We already have a lack of options for families. Do you envision providing options such as 3-bed or 2-bed plus den options? And then the additional question, will any of the units be affordable?
So yeah, so on the large unit sizes, there will be several larger units that could be 2-bedroom plus dens or 3s. The current design is very early in the conceptual design stage, but there are several larger units throughout the building, usually on corners. You know, I'm look, there's a 3-bedroom I'm seeing on this plan. So on 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there's 3 units there, 720 feet, which would be a 3-bedroom. So Fiona, yeah, we would be looking at a healthy number of kind of larger units. And if there seems to be a demand for something even larger than that, then I think we would look into that. As people on the call may know, our Fifth and Bank project in the Glebe is currently under construction. And there are only a handful of what I would call these kind of larger units. The units are smaller than what we're showing in this concept. And then on our Beechwood project that we're going through the rezoning process on now, there are several larger units of between 1,000 and 1,200 feet. So yes, there will be what I would call family-sized units in this building, although there'll be a range of unit sizes. And then in terms of affordability, again, we're very early on in this stage, but you know, coming from our experience in Toronto at Minto, the city there has a really extensive and robust affordability program there. The city waives DCs and offers other incentives to developers and builders to provide affordable units. We'll eventually get there here in Ottawa, I think. It's not just all about inclusionary zoning, but certainly as part of the community benefits package, we would be willing to have discussions or, you know, consider the affordability of the units in this area for sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on to parking. Why is there parking if the intent of the development in this area is to encourage public transit usage?
I can answer that. I can't remember off the top of my head what the ratio is here, Fiona. I believe we are either at or just above the city's minimum requirement here. I think overall we'd be at point. So the minimum city requirement is 0.5 parking spaces per unit for the residential and 0.1 parking spaces per unit for the visitor. I think that's about where we are.
Yes, Kevin, you're right.
Yeah.
We're proposing 0.6 and 0.1.
Yeah,
just
And 0 for retail.
Yeah, and I know, Jeff, you would prefer no parking, but I think we're meeting the minimum requirement, but we're really not going beyond that. And then I guess I would also add that you know, there will be several more units in this building than there would be parking spaces, but we will include car share spaces for residents, and local members would have access to the secured garage to access a car share.
I'll just point out that, you know, this is a rezoning and an OPA. Just as you can request an amendment, you can request an amendment to the parking.
Understood.
Okay, I'm staying on the topic of parking. Will there be any parking for retail customers?
No, we're not proposing parking for commercial at this time. So all of the parking in the garage would secured access for tenants only. So no public parking and no parking for the retail.
Okay. Okay, now there are a lot of questions about the laneway. Sorry, it looks like you're resurfacing the laneway. Is it a city laneway? Who is maintaining it currently, and who will be responsible for maintaining it when it is paving stones?
Andrew, I don't know if you want to answer that one. The laneway is public. I maintains it now. I don't know if anyone on the webinar this evening has ever seen the city plow the lane. I'm going to assume that the tenants are responsible for clearing the parking lot beside the stall and clearing the lane behind. I'm assuming the church has a hand in that as well. I would assume that under this, we would have discussions with me over the ability to widen the lane and to surface it, so we get our 360 design approach to the public realm. And I'm going to assume that as the property owner, that Minto would be responsible for clearing the snow. Andrew, I don't know if what you're experiencing dealing with the city on public lanes, but
typically we don't deal with this at OPA, but it's a really good question.
it is a good question.
We should definitely keep it on, but I like the Minto is going to maintain it.
I think there's also the part about maintaining paving stones, and my experience on the material that we're selecting and being used at Lansdowne, that it requires little maintenance above and beyond regular paving materials because of the design of the unit paver.
Yeah, I know people who live in the neighborhood know this rear lane, and it's a really funky thing, right? It's maybe 4.5 meters wide, and it's not even a straight shot between Hamilton and Parkdale. So we're hoping that by widening it and finishing it as we would the other three sides of the building, this would be a more useful and safe space for pedestrians and cyclists and drivers as well.
Okay, thank you. Staying on the laneway, you say that the back laneway is going to be designed to be pedestrian friendly, yet the loading area is there as well. Can these two uses coexist?
Yes, I can say that they do coexist. There's a number of examples where wooners have been implemented where you can vehicular traffic as well as pedestrian traffic. I think through design changes, it isn't treated as a regular roadway, and generally people when traveling through the space respond differently. It is meant to act more like a driveway coming in as opposed to a thoroughfare or a roadway coming through. So through the design change, it does, people do respond differently.
I'd also highlight how we've kind of set in the loading area. So when a truck would come in, garbage or move in, it would be off the main drag or the main part of the one-up, so it would still be accessible for all modes as well. So that's one of the things we've incorporated.
Thank you. There's a few more questions about the laneway, so I'm going to stay on that topic. What are your thoughts on what sounds like a lot of pressure being placed on a public laneway?
I'm not sure what is meant by a lot of pressure. Is it a question about the public pressure?
Yeah, I'm assuming Bryce, the question is about just how much is happening, pedestrians loading in and out of the garage. I think that's my guess.
Yeah, the way I see it, the flexibility is there, and if you do have through and pedestrians coming through, and even loading, there is enough space to accommodate it. You're not going to get a lot of traffic all at once, we anticipate that it's going to be a mix of uses throughout the day.
Okay, thank you. And I believe we've spoken to this already, but I'll read it out loud just to make sure in case anyone wants to add anything more. The laneway between Parkdale and Hamilton Ave North will be the only access for parking loading for tenants, trades, and retail. This laneway is busy now. How will it be built / designed to still allow for pedestrian use with so much traffic going both ways? Do you want to add anything more on that before moving off?
I think the only thing that I would add, and Bryce, you may have something, is that we're widening it for a reason, right? So it can accommodate all of these uses. I mean, right now, that lane is a little unsafe, just because it jogs and it's very narrow. So you know, I think we see this as a vastly improved condition. Bryce, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think on top of the other comment, a good one to add as well.
Yeah, and I think the key thing here is with the loading space, it's a pull in, pull out. There's no truck, there's no 3-point turns, there's no backing, and that right there is immediately a better situation than the current lane, which is 4.5 meters wide, and there's kind of a negative slope loading area behind the and you know, the jog in the middle of the lane as you come around the back of the church to the parking. So a clear sight line all the way through will certainly help, and then the textured features and the lighting and will absolutely bump things down.
Thank you. There may be more questions about the laneway later, but those are the ones I have for now. I think someone just commenting from an earlier comment, Parkdale Park is a dog-free park, isn't it? Yeah, I believe that's correct. Jeff is nodding.
Yeah, you're right. Hampton Park is the closest dog off-leash park. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and what is the future of the church?
The future of the church, I can answer that. So the church is going to be relocating, from what I understand. I don't know when that will happen. I mean, obviously we're well off from when development would actually occur, right? So both the Rex Hall and the church are going to be on site until, you know, through 2022, I would say. So there's a long way to go yet, but my understanding is that the church is relocating.
Thank
I
you.
assume that question, Fiona, sorry, was about the church that's on the subject property and not the church behind the lane.
Yeah, actually, yes, I'm assuming that's about the church in the former theater building and not the church behind us.
Yeah, Roland can clarify if
okay.
Got it confused, but I think that's
yeah, I'm assuming that's yes. So plans to relocate, and I can roughly say when, but I don't know to where.
okay. Kind of back on the lane, but not 100%. Where is the garbage removal area, loading dock area for deliveries for the retail, and area for trucks for people moving in and out? I believe the answer is the laneway, but please.
Yeah, you can see on this slide on the ground floor plan, you can see the loading space in behind. And again, it's a pull in, pull out space, so there's no backing or 3-point turns or what have you. It's just a cutout in the building to make sure that the lane is open when someone is loading there.
Okay, thank you. So while your concept design seems to focus on the residents, there's absolutely no consideration given to the residents of the area. Not only is the area an issue for driving, parking is also a concern. In addition, what consideration has been given to the residents with old houses and hence old foundations? Blasting is a major concern for homeowners and the impact that it could have?
I can answer that, and then if Simon has anything to add, he can. So this site is in rock. Everybody knows who's lived through the construction of 1040 or of the Reichman retirement residence across the road. It's too early to say whether this would be blasting or hoe ramming. I don't know that, but what I do know is that well in advance of any excavation and shoring on a project in the city, we have to do a pre-construction survey of properties within a certain distance. I think it's 60 meters.
It's expanding, unfortunately.
Is it? Okay. Okay. I don't know what the distance is now. It used to be 60. It might be 100 or it might be 120, but essentially we're required to document through photos and what have you the existing condition and monitor those conditions throughout construction, and if there's any change or damage that results from the construction, it's our responsibility to repair it. So that would be the answer to the construction question. I mean, there's a lot of development in the city that's happening, and it's mostly infill projects like this because that's where the city wants new development to happen and how the city wants our city to grow. So, we're going to see more and more of this. It's not the first time something like this has been done, and rules and regulations and guidelines in place that we have to follow to make sure that surrounding structures are protected, and if there is any damage, that it's repaired. And of course, I just add one more thing. So, Councillor Leeper, I believe you always like to have a kind of a pre-construction community meeting so that everyone's on the same page as to what to expect in terms of work hours, traffic flow, delivery, and all of that. And a traffic management plan for construction is a requirement of a building permit in the city. So when the time comes, however many months from now, a lot of months from now, there'll be opportunity to have input and have a say and get caught up on how the site will work.
We'll do that meeting. If you can do your pre-construction blast survey to a radius of about 113.5 meters, that would be good.
113.5. I'm writing that down.
Just a random number, doesn't mean anything.
Certainly. Simon, I don't know if you had.
Kevin, I just want to add the point that this is a whole block development, which is rare, as Paul pointed out, as the whole block was developed and improved. And we also lined the whole, almost all three sides or four sides with a 360 approach, all lined with good retail, and especially addressing the corner with a special retail at the pop space, hiding the residential lobby closer to the south side and relating to the residential neighborhood to the south. So I mean, the whole development is really designed to upgrade the neighborhood and provide the much needed public realm on this stretch.
Thank you. Do you expect pedestrians/cyclists to divert from Wellington to the Woonerf? What would motivate them to do so?
I would say we're not expecting anyone to divert from Wellington. Well, some users would if they feel it's a safer than being on Wellington, but it's not our intention to divert any of the cycling routes as part of this. This could easily be for residents to the south or residents of the building to access the bike parking or the bike storage within the building, or just get out or through the site without having to go all the way to Wellington if you were in the community to the south.
I'll just say it's the popular route, but theoretically or academically, you might have some cyclists who get off who are eastbound, who may want to deke behind the building through the lane to get on to southbound Parkdale in order to continue their trip on Gladstone. But I don't think that's a normal pattern that we see in the neighborhood.
And I don't see, if that did occur, or people did divert just to go through that area, I don't see it as a bad thing. It's actually a positive for the Woonarf. The more activity you have there, like the slower and more careful any people coming in and out of the ramp or any loading, if it happens to be going in the day, the activity makes everything safer for all users. So if people do that, that would be definitely a positive actually for the site.
Thank you. I just want to note, we do have a hand raised. We're not taking raised hands this evening. If you have any questions or comments, please put it in the Q&A and I can read it out loud for the team to comment on or for their information. Of course, you're encouraged to follow this meeting up with submitting comments as well. So I'm not sure if it was an accidental raised hand or not, but just mentioning that. The raised hand is from the Wellington West BIA who are here tonight, and also so residents know we do have lots of reps from the Hindenburg Community Association also here today. So the next question. I've listened to your planning rationale, but I'm not convinced that you've successfully justified a rationale for not following the Wellington secondary plan. Some say this will set a dangerous precedent for other high buildings along the traditional Main Street on Wellington. What do you say to those critics?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So this slide sort of explained what I said was why we think this site is suitable for high rise. And I sort of touched on the fact that we see this as something that can't be replicated along the corridor. And there's a few reasons for that. Some of, obviously, lot size, you could consolidate properties and get a property of a similar size. You could attain enough sites to make a frontage, but really see the intersection of Parkdale and Wellington as being a critical component of it. It is, called out in the CDP secondary plan as a prominent corner. It's called out at 9 stories. We think that it deserves a higher recognition than that. But we think that because we think we can do that in a contextually sensitive way. So the biggest thing, I guess, is really about the transition to low rise and the impacts of a tall building at this location as compared to a tall building maybe on another site within the corridor. So not only from a transition perspective, which the city uses the angular plane tool often as a way to measure transition, and that's what we've done here. Transition from the low rise, transition up to the corner across Hamilton Avenue from future sort of development potential across Hamilton Avenue, but also from a shadow impact perspective. So looking at is it resulting in significant shadows over residential properties, private amenity areas of adjacent buildings, or public parks. In this case, there's a minimal impact to Parkdale Park in the shoulder seasons, none in the summer season, given the short shadows, but slightly more in the winter, obviously, given the longer shadows. But that's really what we see as the unique element of this property, is its ability to accommodate a high rise in what we feel is contextually sensitive way. And we don't see that being possible on other sites along the corridor. We are still looking at other sites to see, okay, could this be done? Is there a way that it can be done in a sensitive way? But at this point, our sense is that this site is unique for that reason. And so it's appropriate for a high rise because of that. And so that's our intention through the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment, is to recognize that uniqueness of this property and make sure that it is specific to this site as a potential high-rise site.
Thank you. What type of retail is envisioned for the ground space level?
I can answer that. So we're actually in talks with Rexall. Very interested in coming back to this location. They've even suggested that they would take all of the space. Yeah, and I think we would prefer that they didn't, so that we can mix things up a little bit along the frontage along Wellington. We kind of have 2.5 sides potential retail here. So we want to make sure that we animate that 2.5 sides of retail as much as humanly possible, right? We've got the Pops at the super busy corner of Wellington and Parkdale, and then we have, you know, the theater marquee element that we're going to revive at the Hamilton side. So in my opinion, ideally, we would have several businesses in this space. But I do know that Rexall is wanting to come back to this location at the very least. So, and also one of the things that I wanted to point out, and once the applications are in, you know, we're hoping to have discussions with the BIA and HCA on not only potential benefits, community benefits in the project, but also suggestions for retail mix that we can work to curate to fill the space on the street level.
Thank you. This is more of a question for the councillor. Does this type of development open the door for more high rises along Wellington?
It's a good question. And I am concerned. What I will say for the moment is that there's going to be broad, I think, between planners and council that this is a prominent quarter that has greater height. I believe that for the most part, council wants to hold the line, and planners, city planners want to hold the line between the gateways. So you go from sort of the Bayswater corner to Parkdale. And while there are some high-rise buildings that are already there, I think city council and planners for the next 15 to 20 years are going to want to try to hold the line. If we know that the pressure is going to be on the 6-story limit to go to 9, and some of that is going to be determined by the LPAT if council starts turning things down. The other corner, of course, is Holland. But we do have the OMB approval of the 18-story building that is at Spencer, between Spencer and Armstrong, facing Parkdale, which council turned down, and which the OMB ended up approving. So if there is a really big lot assembly somewhere, I can't give you any guarantee today that whether with council approval or through an appeals process to the LPAT, that we wouldn't start to see taller buildings creep down Wellington. It is everyone's intention to keep the traditional Main Street height to 6 stories. The developers are going to pressure for 9, and that will resolve itself over the course of the next decade or two. But I don't know whether or not the LPAT is going to sustain council refusals of particularly aggressive developments. The 18-story at the gateway here, if you want to call it that, at the prominent corner, is going to make sense to a lot of people at the city. But I think because it will be there, I think it does start to make it more likely that a very aggressive developer with a large assembly of land could potentially start seeing it creep down.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Can you please put up a slide and draw a line where where the cars will enter the building, and repeat the number of cars expected?
Okay, I'll let someone else do the drawing, and I'll toss up the numbers as that happens. So what we have, and we're still in the process of confirming this with the city, and we haven't submitted yet, so take this all with a grain of salt, and also being at an OPA and ZBA It's usually the highest number that's possible within the site. So, you know, everything's a single bedroom. So you have like a big number of single units, where when it comes down to the actual site plan, it will reduce. So with that context, we are looking at about, in the morning, 58 total car trips, 15 in, 43 out. And in the PM, we're looking at about 69 total trips with 41 in and 28 out. That's kind of similar to how the transit trips, and almost an equal amount of you know, car passengers, cyclists, and pedestrians as well anticipated. It's almost like a 1/3 split between each of those kind of categories: cars, transit, and everybody else. And that includes residents as well as retail trips for pedestrians and cyclists.
Simon, are you able to draw in
Yep.
Zoom on?
Yep, go ahead. So what do you want me to draw, the direction of the going into the parking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just yeah. So there we go. And then Andrew, I don't know if you want to explain what you're
So-
thinking in terms of the in the back in terms of direction.
Yeah, so what we're anticipating some you know, concerns about any full move on Parkdale. So what we're kind of considering is just a right out on Parkdale right now. So there'll be no left turns. We don't know if there's going to be signs or physical restrictions, but we're not anticipating anything. It's just the way it would have to function. And then Hamilton, it'll just be two-way between Hamilton and the parking garage. So that would permit outbound for people that, you know, if you wanted to head north or west, you weren't circling the block down to Tyndall, you could get back up onto Wellington or even head east that way. And I know the next question is, and it ties back into how we are going to treat Hamilton. We will get there, but that is as an access arrangement, this will be people to go travel between Wellington and Tyndall without any restrictions at the moment. So we're aware, we know that concern, and we will try to address it as best we can.
Thank you. A canyon-like wind funnel will be created on Parkdale, very unpleasant for pedestrians and bike cyclists. Have you got any studies on this?
Yeah, so in consult with city staff last summer, a pedestrian wind study was one of the requirements for the application, and one is being prepared and will be submitted application. We will have a study that goes in, and we'll have to address any mitigation in the design.
Thank you. Okay, so this question, we've answered half of it, I think, or just this person needs a refresher. So how many units total in the building, and are they all rental or condo? So it is rental, but can we refresh ourselves how many units are in the building?
Yeah, sure thing, Fiona. So the current concept shows 240. So 240 units, and right now they're being proposed as rental.
Thank you. It is difficult to understand how developers can rationalize 18-story building as being compatible with the neighborhood. There are no other buildings of that size in the area on Wellington. There is a reason why the traditional Main Street supports up to 9 stories max, and that should be maintained. How can they rationalize doubling that regulation?
Yeah, so it would be the tallest building on the corridor. That is correct. The next tallest, I think, would be 1140 Wellington to the east. So in terms of the rationale for it, the official plan sets out clear criteria that we would need to meet. We would need to demonstrate how we're achieving them to be able to rationalize a high-rise building. And so that's what we're setting out to do. So those criteria I mentioned are things like proximity to transit or transit priority corridors, created by the development, provision of a community benefit, which is also in the secondary plan as a precursor for greater height at this corner. And then also the urban design and compatibility. So a lot of those policies in the official plan, as well as, you know, feedback from the urban design review panel, incorporating feedback from the direction from the urban design guidelines. So all of those things will are how we can rationalize it, and it's on us to present that rationale and make that argument successfully. So that we're working towards doing.
Thank you. How much parking for residential, business, and visitors?
Sorry, Fiona, the question was parking for?
The parking kind of
the
breakdown. So
parking for?
residential, business, visitors.
Right. So there's no parking proposed for the business, but there's 0.5 stalls, which is the city's requirement for the residential units, and 0.1 stalls for the residential visitors. So the garage is not intended or designed to be a public garage, although we have reached out to city staff to see if there is interest at all in a green P, a city parking garage at this location. We haven't heard back yet.
Kevin, we're proposing 0.6.
0.6 total.
Will this presentation be available to review? There was lots of information and sometimes the slides went by very quickly, so I can answer that. So in the next few weeks, the developer is going to make what we call a formal submission to the city. And that's when all of these details that you're seeing in the presentation get submitted to the city. There's a site called DevApps. I or Steve will put the link into that very shortly. When it's formally submitted, you go to DevApps and you type this address. We'll also link to it on our blog, and I'm sure Jeff will advertise it in his newsletter. And when you go to the application page, you're going to see all of these details just broken down into separate files. So there'll be the site plan, the landscaping plan, various different plans, geotechnical, et cetera, that are part of the file. And that's where you'll be able to see them in the near future. As to whether or not they want to circulate this particular presentation right now, I will turn that over to them to answer.
We don't have a problem with sharing this with you at all. This presentation is public, and so this presentation, the file is public. So I can send you a PDF. Whoever requests it, you can share it.
Perfect. So maybe Kevin will send it to us, and if someone wants it, we can forward it. Sorry, Jeff.
No, yeah, for sure. If you send me the PDF, I'll make sure that gets distributed via the newsletter by posting it to our site. But I think as well, this YouTube or this presentation will go up online within a day or so on YouTube if you want to rewatch it.
Yes, exactly. Will funds be collected for the provision of park and recreation purposes? Or are there sufficient plans for exterior recreation / park space for the public to access that cash in lieu in parkland will not apply?
So the site isn't big enough for a parkland dedication, but there will be a cash in lieu of parkland dispensement of this project, absolutely. And for a project of this size, it's probably fairly significant. I would suggest it's probably around $1 million.
Don't tell them $1 million. They're going to get so many grand ideas. No, that'll be great.
Well, so the other thing to note is this application is going in before the province and the city finalize the community benefit, the new community benefit rules, which are set to change. I don't know how this will be caught up in that. You know, for our modeling purposes, we're assuming cash in lieu of parkland at 10% of the land value.
Yeah, so if we have not started to develop our strategy to transition to the CBC, so if you file today, you're not caught in the transitional
Right.
phase or anything like that. So it would be the status quo. Just so folks know, the final evaluation for cash in lieu of parkland is usually done closer to the approval of the site plan. So Kevin's given a rough estimate, and we'll get a more defined figure later on in the process.
I'll just say it's one of the very few that the councillor has any control over, and that the councillor concurrence is required. So I'll certainly allow the resident about how benefits you.
Yeah, certainly. And then the other aspect of the project, depending on the approved size in the end, is the Section 37 contribution as well. And Councillor, you deal with that quite a bit in your ward. So that's another piece of development contribution.
I will note too that, and someone, Steve, maybe can correct me to make sure I get the details right, but with cash in lieu, it's 60% goes to the ward and 40% goes to the city. So we may not see $1 million of cash in lieu because there is that division, just so folks have the head.
You are correct.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew it was 60-40, wasn't 100% sure which way it went.
Fiona, you are a planner by osmosis, so.
Thanks. Okay, how energy efficient will this building be? There seems to be a lot of lighting proposed. How will this be powered?
Okay, I can answer that. So, so one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Minto is our environmental approach to all of our projects. Projects in Ottawa and in Toronto, whether they're mid-rise or high-rise, are third-party certified. And in this case, we'll be pursuing LEED version 4.1 BDC. Lansdowne was LEED Gold. Upper West in Westboro was silver. Minto Beechwood was LEED Silver, and we're pursuing LEED Gold on our second Beechwood project in New Edinburgh. So it's a big part of our projects and of our development ethos. Minto has an ESG strategy, an environmental, social, and government strategy that our projects have support and reflect. So this will be a very energy efficient, low water using, high building envelope performance building. All the lighting's LED, whether it's inside or outside. Motion sensors on lighting, all of that. There will be electric car charging stations in the garage. We'll have car share in the garage, and high efficiency heating and cooling system as well. So absolutely, this will be a high performance building.
All right, thank you. How long does this type of building take for construction?
That's a good question. I should have my high-rise construction guy here. So a project of this size would take, I'm going to say, 30 months, 32 months from start to finish. So that's demolition, excavation and shoring, and then the formwork to build the building and then finishing it. So it would be a 30 or 32 month exercise on this for sure. I mean, we do have the advantage on this site. We noted earlier about the construction tax. We do kind of have 4 streets here, which is not usually the case on an infill project. Our Fifth and Bank project in the Glebe, we've preserved 325-year-old plus buildings, and we're building right behind it, and only 2 streets of access. So really tough. This one will be much more straightforward for sure.
Thank you. What is the height of the tallest existing residential high-rise along Wellington Street commercial corridor?
I think it's 14 is 1140 Wellington. Is that right, Paul?
That's the tallest, yeah.
Yeah. So I think this context figure is interesting because people forget how tall the buildings are in the area, right? So Reichman retirement residence that's just finishing up now and looks great is a tall 9. And then there's 8 across the street to the north of that. And then the 2 12-story buildings side by side. And then the little apartment building to the south of our site is 13. And then of course there's the 10 stories at Holland, GCTC, but it's a very tall 10 because of the theater spaces in the podium. Over a certain height of a building, the impact diminish, go up. And again, one of the main reasons that we're proposing this built form, and Simon spoke to it, and so did Paul at length, is to keep low in Wellington and just shove all the height to the busy corner where there's no impact on what's around it. So being, taking it easy on Hamilton and just stepping it up onto Parkdale. But I think 14 is the height, if I'm not mistaken.
So we're at this point in the meeting where we're getting questions now from some of our previous conversations, which is totally fine. So there's a few more about the laneway now. Is the lane one way?
I can see those questions, so I guess I'll just kind of answer a few of them in a row here. So it's going to be, what we're looking at as an access solution is 2-way from Hamilton to the garage access. So I'll just draw on here for it. So yeah, so this section is going to be 2-way, and then it's going to be 1-way onto Parkdale, and that would be per the city's private approach bylaw. So yeah, there'd be stop signs on both sides for it. But yeah, what this plan doesn't show you in the context is how once we hit this point, how we design that portion of the lunar to reinforce the 1-way. So that's not on this plan, and that definitely will come out in the submission and pop up on DevApps. But same as there's plenty of spots around the city where you transition from 2-way to 1-way with like on a road it'd be a bulb out, but this may be bollards, it may be a tree planting, there may be something we just haven't finalized that, but it will be coming, and that will be clear on the submission.
Thank you. And the 2 others, will there be stop signs for cars to exit the back lane onto Hamilton North or Parkdale?
Yes.
Okay. And then Roland says, oddly, would not a wider lane be less rather than more safe for pedestrians, since the idea of a 1R is that the slowest user determines the speed?
So I'd say relatively, it does look like it's expanding quite a bit, but when you're going from a tight single car or truck movement on the back to having, basically the width between Hamilton and the parking garage would only be wide enough as if you were in a normal parking lot that's 6.5 meters in that range. So you think about how fast you can drive in a parking aisle, because the side friction is going to be there in that part. And then we are narrowing it down as we move out to Parkdale. So that's part of that transition I discussed previously. The one thing also to consider is there is still the church on the south side that's going to be there. So we're integrating that so that there's actually, as I said, that I use that term side friction. So it's going to feel a lot tighter, even if we do expand the width of travel from 4-ish meters to 6 meters.
Thank you. How many bicycle spaces will be provided?
That's an easy one, Fiona. So we provide 1 bicycle space for every residential unit. So we park our projects at 1-to-1 for lead purposes and lots of other purposes. So 1-to-1. So 240 units, 240 spaces.
Perfect. I'm just checking in because I've realized we've reached an hour and a half. There are 26 more questions. So as long as it's okay with our panelists, which I believe it's going to be because I'm basically telling them to, we're going to go to 9 and get through as many questions as possible. But we will have to conclude at 9. Could you please show the December shadow slide again? I am interested in the shadow that is cast northeast towards Armstrong. Does anyone want to speak to that, or I guess there's not too much to dive into? David, if you have more on that, let us know. Is the terrace with the community garden accessible to the general public or only tenants?
At this time, Fiona, it's intended as a private amenity space for the residents of the building.
Okay. Roland responding back from the church conversation. Yes, he was asking about the church on the site. Excuse me. What proportion of EV charging spaces do you initially foresee? Will the parking garage design be flexible, for example, electrical infrastructure, to increase this number to future-proof the development?
Yeah, I can answer that. So yes, in all of our projects, we future-proof them from a car charging standpoint. So the Ontario Building Code requires a certain percentage of parking spaces to have the infrastructure for future fit up of a charging space. I can't remember what the number, I'm sorry, it might be 20%.
I think it's 20%.
I think it's 20%. So 20% of the total spaces proposed in the garage would have to be, at least, would have to be, have the infrastructure present that a charging station could be installed in the future. And then in this project, it's too early to say how many spaces we would provide with actual charging stations. I know at our Fifth and Bank project, I think we're providing 8 charging stations. There would be at least that number of spaces here. So that's a good question. So yes, EV is part of the lead strategy, high-performing build strategy, and future-proofing down the road.
Okay. Okay, maybe, okay. Sorry, is there going to be a commitment to affordable housing in this development? This person notes that they might have missed this before, and I know we did talk about it before, but can you speak to that quickly again?
Yeah, we did. So just to reiterate that, so we haven't gone into that level of detail yet. It's very early in the design of the building and the process, but that will be considered as part of the larger bucket of community benefits that we'll be looking at with the community for this building.
I'm sorry, I just want to jump in quickly. I didn't when the question was first raised, but this is something that I consider particularly important. The height here is significantly more than what the zoning contemplates, or the secondary plan contemplates. And if the developer wants to persist at these sort of heights, it becomes important to me as the councillor that there be an affordable housing component that is significant in order to offset the impacts of the much larger building. If they start looking at something that's built closer to being as of right, it becomes less difficult to achieve. But I'll be talking to my colleagues about and encouraging them to vote according to the level that's offered.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay. I think we've touched on this, but I'm going to read it out loud just to be sure. Has there been analysis of the impact of existing developments in the area? We already have the huge buildings north on Parkdale, the ridiculous approved 18-story development on Armstrong, the large new seniors residence at Parkdale, Wellington, etc. The real negative impact of all of this has not been felt yet, and this new proposal will only exacerbate the current issues with traffic congestion, noise, and will put more pressure on city services, buses, water, sewage service, etc. There has to be a more responsible view to development rather than maximizing profits and tax revenue and preserving the quality of life and character of Hintonburg. Does anyone want to respond or noted?
I don't know if Andrew has any comments on traffic, but to consider the back condition, including, I think, what is already approved or in the pipeline. I know from the preliminary analysis on servicing sewer, water, storm, and all of that, this concept is well within the city's existing capacity for those infrastructures.
I add on that all these things are looked at as part of a development application, and they will be on dev apps. So from my side, the traffic, transit, cycling, pedestrian, all that perspective, everything up to the current, other developments in the area, developments outside of this area that would come into this city, and then we do it as a kind of like a time. Each one goes in sequence. So the next application in the area would then consider this application in their analysis. So each study keeps building forever and forever on the previous study. So.
If I can, Joe, I would just invite you to give me a call or come by one of my pop-ups at some point. This is the process that the city is actually going through right now. Is there's an official plan that describes roughly what kind of development we want to see where. That rolls down into things like the transit long-range plan, the transportation master plan, the infrastructure master plan, the parks and recreation master plan. How do we provide the services and amenities that people need? And then how do we pay for those? And it gets turned into a long-range financial plan, development charges, the community benefits charge, the section 37, the cash in lieu. There is a wider plan than just the one-offs, and I would love to have an opportunity with you about how we do that, because several of them are underway right now. I know Cheryl Parrott is on the call with the Hintonburg Community Association, and I know Tara is with the Wellington Village Community Association as well, who are looking hard at the thousands of residents that intensification is expected to bring to Hintonburg, Mechanicsville, Civic Hospital, Champlain, Wellington Village, and how that intensification is going to get turned into green space and parks and recreation facilities. I'm less concerned about services like the water and the sewer. The engineers have that well in hand, but the transportation infrastructure, how are we going to ensure that if we are expecting people to use active and public transportation, that we have the necessary infrastructure for that? How are we going to alleviate the pressure that our ward feels, particularly that emanates out from the Champlain Bridge, by way of connecting our transit systems and trying to get people? How are we going to get people from Tunney's Pasture to Orleans and to Canada using LRT so that they're not on Parkdale? It's a lot of very large moving pieces, most of which are being discussed by City Hall right now. So Joe, please give me a call and we'll chat.
Thank you. A similar comment. The proposed height of your building is 18 stories, and you referenced a proposed 18-story building on Parkdale and Spencer. The implication being this size has already been approved. This other 18-story building, however, was determined because the corner lots of Scott and Parkdale are approved to be 24/25-story buildings, and the slope from Scott through to Wellington going down to 6 to 9 stories at Wellington. Your proposal removes that slope. It is also twice the height of the CDP. I haven't heard any rationale as to why this should be allowed. Does anyone want to respond? Other boards noted.
Yeah, I think I'll just say that, I mean, we're showing the 18-story there at Armstrong and Parkdale just as a part of the context of the, we're showing some other buildings in the area that have been approved or that are in the work. So we would just show that one as part of that. But I've explained what we intend, our rationale for this site and why 18 stories is appropriate. So I'll just refer back to that, I guess. But
Okay. Have you approached a small Cineplex to bring back the movie theater on the ground floor?
We have not. That's nothing that we have done at this yet. And I don't know why one would survive here now when one was there for years and hasn't been for 25. So we haven't considered that. We do know that the corner marquee element is of historic and heritage interest, and that's why we're integrating it into design of the new building. And it's going to make a great corner here at Hamilton, and we're really excited about that. And we'll be working with our heritage architect and dialogue on that. But there has not been any discussion or consideration for bringing back a movie theater to this location.
Okay, thank you. The building would be the building would be in significant corner, but 18 stories is 5 stories higher than any other building in the area. What's the justification for that added height? Would it conform to the proposed density height under the new official plan for traditional main streets?
yeah, so as we've noted, it is mostly related to the unique properties, unique aspects of this property, and that's what we feel like is the justification for high rise, and we'll be laying that out more fully in our planning rationale that will be part of the submission. But with regards to the new official plan, so those policies are still sort of in flux. Basically, though, the new official plan policies would defer to the secondary plan as a baseline. So we'd be sort of in the same scenario now in terms of what the policies of the plan say for traditional main streets. Based on the As We Heard It report that came out late last week, it's expected that those would stay sort of as mid-rise. And then with regards to the policies around seeking greater height, then might be, that I referenced regarding, the criteria for consideration of higher buildings. We don't know what those policies are going to say ultimately at this point. There was some language around that in the draft, but it's still in flux at this point. So as making a submission as we intend in the next couple of weeks, we would be subject to the current official plan policies and the current secondary plan and zoning. So.
The new official plan won't take effect until the minister has signed off, I believe, which could be 18 months, 2 years from now. So,
yeah.
Well, 16 months. We'll see how that goes. But I think this proposal is absolutely going to be viewed within the lens of the existing official plan.
Thank you. A question really for Jeff. With a project like this and location of the lane, will you be looking at an option to add an egress or restricting access from Wellington or the lane south on Hamilton?
Interesting question. It has been a while since I've looked at this proposal, and obviously the lane is a concern for me. Adding an egress to Wellington, don't believe meets with the city's policies of coming out onto an arterial street. Just speaking as someone who cycles through that block every single morning, I also have to say I'm not keen to have an additional garage added there. I think the traffic is best brought in off of Parkdale or Hamilton, but I also don't want that traffic continuing its way down Hamilton Avenue North, and again, full disclosure, in front of my house. I think the sort of the basic plan, if this proposal moves ahead in something similar to its current form, is the right one. But we do need to be fierce on ensuring that that traffic is not coming down the residential street. So no, I wouldn't be looking for an egress onto Wellington. I think that will make an unsafe intersection even less safe, and I don't believe that they would allow it either, both for reasons of policy of coming the egress onto an arterial, but also so very close to a signal. I'm seeing Kevin nod. So Steve Gauthier is here. He's going to be the planner on the file. This isn't a city meeting, so he's to defend or oppose the project. But I don't know, Steve, if you have some details you can pass on with respect to that part of the transportation policy.
Well, I'm not part of the transportation group, but I can reflect what you've said. But by locating an egress in between the two intersections, and especially close to the lights there, I do see an issue.
I think that one's pretty much a non-starter. The laneway is something I want to look really closely at. In terms of how that works, the traffic calming for Hamilton Avenue North and prohibitions against traffic continuing south or getting to the development from Tyndall. Just speaking again as a resident, I think the opportunity is interesting to make this a better space for those of us who are cutting through to get to the bus stop on Parkdale, which is, I think, a relatively common route. But again, tonight, there's not going to be really any sort of answers to these questions. It's something we're going to have to work on through the course of the next several weeks, or I should say probably the next couple of months anyways.
Okay, thank you. I have a slew of comments and concerns from the Wellington West BIA, so I'm going to read them out as concisely as I can. So it starts, this is one of the most important and prominent corners in the commercial district. The BIA has not been consulted or included in any discussion on this development over the course of the last year, and this is the first opportunity to actually see these designs. I'm not sure how else I can speak for the BIA's and the CDP's vision for this critical area without an ability to speak. So just before I move on to the next comment, I think we've noted at the beginning of the meeting, this is just the first blush, and there's going to be lots of active conversations to continue. But going on with Dennis's comments.
Sorry, if I may.
Yep.
I know we're starting to run out of time. The piece that I see from the Wellington BIA is the context of this in the CDP is the mandate to develop a clear network of people spaces, the very narrow frontage on Wellington Street West, the very small token of the publicly owned public space, as it's been called, and the prioritization of the rear laneway over creating a wider, more welcoming public realm experience on the corner, run completely counter to the spirit of the CDP. So that's good feedback. What I just want to say is we haven't even really started the consultation yet. Tonight is an opportunity to get a first glimpse at the plans. Over the course of the next several weeks, I know I'll be hearing from many of you about what you actually think about. The consultation on the application will start once an application, a complete application, is filed with the city. So tonight is really just an opportunity to and we'll debate the proposal over the course of the next several months. But yeah, we've gotten 49 questions out of the way this evening, and I'm pleased at how quickly we're running through those. So Fiona, if you could just move on to the next one, please.
Sure thing. Sorry, just tidying up my question queue here. Where is the grass? In a big rainstorm, we want to avoid flooding. How can we do that when everything is paved over?
We don't have our civil engineer on the call, but there is no grass There will be soil cells where the street trees are planted, and they'll take some stormwater. We haven't determined whether or not there'll be a green roof as part of the project. I think there may be on the one-story podium piece that backs onto Hamilton and the lane. Like most urban projects, the new development can't generate any more stormwater than the current site. And then there's water quality standards that we have to meet as well. Like most of these urban projects, there'll be a stormwater cistern located in the basement level of the building, in the garage. We typically use that water to irrigate. Use that kind of stormwater to irrigate on the site, and then it's released slowly to the storm system per the city's guidelines. And there's all kinds on that. So I don't know if I missed anything, Simon. On
there's actually a little bit of grass on the Hamilton side. So we're putting 3 street trees there in softscape. It's always better if we can put in 3 or put trees in softscape. So that's one location.
Yeah. And then we may be doing that green roof on the back, on that one-story piece at the back of the lane at Hamilton. The city has very stringent rules for stormwater management, and we have to abide by all of those for sure.
I just want to say, normally these large projects are an opportunity to improve the existing conditions. One of the things that I'll be sending into site plan when we get to that point, in however long it is, currently there is a lot of runoff from melting snow that runs across the Hamilton Avenue sidewalk, and it becomes a massive puddle, and it freezes. It's a really bad spot, and then these contractors make it worse by covering the storm drain there. So I'll be looking for a big improvement in terms of managing stormwater and snow runoff from this project if it moves ahead.
Yeah, good question though.
Thank you. How do visitors get into the underground parking?
So visitors, basically there'll be a interphone on the ramp, the garage ramp. And typically what happens is you use the interphone to call the resident that you're going to be visiting, and then they buzz you in. So it's pretty straightforward process. That's typically how it's done on projects nowadays, if the garage is a secure garage.
Thank you. Given the traffic conditions on Parkdale, which are likely to make it difficult for morning drivers to exit the building via Parkdale, won't lots of the traffic route via Hamilton to either Tyndall or Wellington, both of which are at capacity throughout the morning peak?
You're going to catch me on a process question here. Since it is the OPA and zoning, we look at high-level network impacts. So while our network is pretty robust, we don't have Hamilton specific operations. Also adding into that pandemic kind of restricted us being able to collect any of this data. So I would say we will have that data in the next year or so, something to at least project this onto and identify those impacts at both Tyndall and Wellington for Hamilton. From a traffic assignment perspective, yes, we are hoping that to the laneway is the predominantly used point. We are currently identifying likely impacts to the south with no mitigation, and that's going to help inform the conversation about how we do mitigate southbound, like traffic to and from the south of the site on Hamilton down to Tyndall and from Tyndall. That discussion with the city, the councillor, and yourselves at the future consultation. So yeah, it kind of just the process we're in. I don't have those precise answers for you at this, but I would, in the next couple of months, we'll have a bit more, and then next year we'll have a lot more definite answer for you.
Thank you. How will traffic move from the building to north and westbound routes?
That was my my hope for the Wellington portion of that previous answer. There will be some people that probably will go south to Tyndall to head out to the west, but north, it would be pretty easy to go out and right onto Wellington comparatively. And then however you filter to the north, being in the approach lanes to the Parkdale, so the eastbound lanes on Wellington, there will be opportunity. I know it's not always the most convenient turn onto Wellington in the area, but people do get out and loop around all the time throughout the day. So there will be an opportunity for some of those people to head up and to the west on Wellington. Like for example, right now we're only assuming 4 people in the AM and 2 people in the PM would be able to turn left from Hamilton onto Wellington in an hour. So 1 every 15 minutes. So we're kind of incorporating that into our assignment and really, as I said, forcing the traffic to go where it's going to be most convenient. So we have a gauge of how much we have to mitigate and where we can move forward with those plans as this develops.
Thank you. So we have 3 minutes left. Jeff, are there any questions you see that you'd really like answered?
You know what, I think just for clarity, Helen's question regarding, is this building 7 stories plus 18 or a total of 18? Just for clarity's sake, let's get that answer out.
It's 6 along Wellington, and then there's a 12-story tower plate on top for a total of 8. So it's not plus, it's total.
Thanks. That's not always clear, so that's it's a good question.
6-story podium, and then the small tower plate going up there. You can see that in the section. That's a great question.
I can answer with to will Parkdale be expanded to meet the extra traffic toward the highway? That's in the developer's purview to do, but I can tell you the city will virtually certainly not look at that. We are focused not on road expansions, but on getting our active transit, our public transit up to snuff so it becomes a preferable option. Will there be any street parking for residents if they need that? I don't believe that we have a Hamilton Avenue North is permit zone. You're not allowed to get street parking. I don't believe that this development would trigger the city to allow that. One of the things that I've been asking all of the developers when they're proposing things that have fewer than 1 spot per unit, which is today most of them, is to be really, really clear with prospective tenants that if there is no spot available, they're not going to be able to move in with a car because there is no parking anywhere else in the neighborhood. Another attendee asks, Councillor, how will the city meet the needs of residents in terms of recreation and park, etc.? Do we have the facilities to welcome 240 plus households? Again, I would encourage you to take a look at the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Engage with the Wellington Village Community Association, Community Association, the Mechanicsville Community Association, and the Civic Hospital Community Association. We're probably going to see, between the end of Scott at Churchill and Le Breton Flats, we're going to be seeing tens of thousands of new residents. This is just one building among many, and we have a more holistic plan for that, which is what the city is doing right now in its official plan and master planning processes. So please get involved with your community associations so that they can advocate for realistic, paid for plans to get our parks and recreation infrastructure and ward up to snuff. Good question from Pat, which will be the last one I read out, is does Minto also own the block of land to the west from Hamilton? Does building height here set precedent for other future adjacent buildings? just answer the question that if this goes down to 6 stories on the west side, I doubt very much that it will create a huge precedent to start going taller as you get into I believe it's domicile buildings as you go west from Hamilton. But I'll just ask Kevin, do you own that land? Okay. Fiona, you know what, rather than just turning it over to Fiona, I just want to, because I know she's going to turn it back over to me. First off, I just want to say thank you very much to the development team for showing the plans this evening. Thank you, residents, for coming out. We finally ended up with, how many participants are there, Fiona?
There are 23 attendees.
Okay, so we still have 23. I think it went up to 32. So obviously a high level of interest. This presentation will be made available on our ward YouTube channel. And the consultation really hasn't even begun yet. So tonight was your opportunity to get a first glimpse of the proposal, to ask your questions about it. I would encourage everyone to become involved and engaged with their community association. Every one of the community associations in the area is likely going to submit thoughts and comments to the planner once this becomes an actual application and the consultation begins. I would encourage you to copy me on any send to the city planners so that I can take that into account as I determine what my own approach is going to be. What I heard this evening is unsurprising. You know, obviously the height of the building, which is significantly taller than anything else in Hindenburg, really taller than anything else until you get to Tunney's pasture, is a really serious concern. The traffic that is anticipated to come from the building is obviously anticipated to be a really serious concern. And the strain on our ward's amenities, parks and infrastructure is not surprising again to hear about. So those are going to be a number of the key things that we're looking at. I'm particularly interested in looking at the affordable housing component. While this doesn't replace housing, we still have obviously a really high need in a fast gentrifying ward to ensure there's still opportunity for people from walks of life to live in our neighborhood. It is probably one of the biggest questions that keeps me up at night. So all of those, I know you're going to make submissions on, and consultation actually gets underway. Watch my newsletter. If you don't subscribe, I have a weekly newsletter in which I describe everything that's going on. And otherwise, I'll just say, turn it back over to Fiona if I've Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you very much to Minto and their team. And Fiona, as always, I appreciate the expert facilitation.
Thank you. There was just a few questions that came in, so just do exactly what Jeff said. Make sure you're sending your comments once the application is submitted. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight, both residents and development team. And thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening. I know I'll hear from you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Much
Thank
appreciated.
you. Thank you.